Travis, how you doing?
Good. How's it going, guys?
Excellent. Thanks. Everybody, welcome. This is episode 113 of Tech Sales Insights. Definitely looking forward to have Travis Ashby, who's the CEO and founder of Worklyfe, a very cool company taking care of the all-important mental health and some other issues to keep everybody happy, side, and especially come out of this post-COVID time. His topic is how to intrinsically motivate your team. Very appropriate, of course. We're sponsored today by DecisionLink, who's a value selling platform company of sales community. If you think through the importance of kind of value selling, that you can have a whole bunch of technical mumbo jumbo, but ultimately if you're going to talk to the CFO in an elevator about either them being a customer or why they should buy from you, you're not going to talk about speeds and fees. You're going to talk about what it's going to do to impact the revenue, what it's going to do to help them save money. In the case of Worklyfe, likely if you're able to improve retention, improve productivity, improve happiness, and that improves, which we'll talk about a little bit probably, you can improve somebody's productivity by 10%. What is that worth for you? And then always brought to you by Sales Community. For those that are members, thank you very much. For those that are not, Tucker, who's behind the scenes here, always helping. Thank you, Tucker. Can post. We've got a free link. You can go to salescommunity.com and you'll see upper left-hand corner, it says winter free. So you can click on that or the paid link. I recommend you do the free link. So Tucker, thank you for posting that. So moving on here with Ashby, who lives in Salt Lake City, great spot. And besides work, is very passionate about his family, has 3 boys, 8, 12, and 15, likes sports, likes strategy. So let's jump into the questions here. So your first job was actually in sales for Coke, right?
Yeah, first job, I guess kind of real job was at Coke when I was when I was 21. Yeah, wanted to get into sales, and they said, all right, well, to get into sales here, you got to drive first. And so I had to get a CDL license and drive the big trucks around, and then work my way into sales over there. No way.
Any fond memories? Anything in sales there? I've never done that.
I mean, it was fun. It was relationship sales, right? I mean, you're trying to get the store manager to like you better than they like the Pepsi guy, and then get display space and drive impulse purchases and market share and all that stuff. So it's a different type of job for sure, but really fun job. And I really realized quickly that the way to get success in that type of job is just to just people like doing business with people they like, and to be able to just over service and create friendships, and that's how you won. So, but anyways, I was there for a little bit, and then I was recruited by the dark side eventually. So,
Pepsi?
Doing a pretty good job in my stores, and Pepsi came over and offered me double my salary, and so I jumped over there, and so I'm a big Pepsi guy now. All Pepsi all the time. So.
Awesome. And then maybe kind of quickly go through your career from there.
Yeah. So Pepsi, I was there for a little bit, almost 5 years, and kind of had an interesting story on how I ended up leaving that job. But I eventually just graduated with a business and marketing degree and wanted to get into marketing sales and wanted to do more hardcore selling, or getting people to sign contracts and go out and make some real commissions. And so I switched over to superpages.com. So in the early 2000s, when we actually had phone books still, that's, a different kind of world now.
I remember those days.
Yeah. So Verizon had a phone book, and they had this online yellow page directory called superpages.com. And that's what I started selling. And this was before Google AdWords was even a thing. So that was fun. But great. I was there, kind of Salt Lake. We had like 30 reps, and ended up doing that for a few years, which was great. I doubled my salary again and made 6 figures for the first time, and was kind of a top rep over there, and did the President's Club trips and all those things, and then eventually left there to start my own business in 2007. So that was kind of a fun story.
Well, so let's hear the story, because you're going from basically a rep to a entrepreneur or founder.
Yeah, it was a really interesting story. I had never had any plans to be an entrepreneur. That wasn't anything that I had thought about or had ambitions to do. But one day, gosh, it probably was, let's see, when would that have been? That would have been in 2007. The economy was turning. These small businesses were shaving back all their marketing because they couldn't afford to do everything anymore. And so I remember walking into an appointment one day. It was with a heating and air company. And I walked in and fully expecting that this guy was going to say, hey, we're cutting super pages. Sorry, things are tight. That's kind of what was going on. But I knew he had just met with my competitor, another online Yellow Page directory. It's called Dex Knows. And I thought for sure that they were going to stick with them because they were a better product than we were. Like they just were a better online directory. And so I walk in and the guy's like, hey, things are tough, but I decided I'm going to just do two, kind of work with two companies. I'm going to work with you guys. I'm going to work with Moneymailer. And I was like, well, how did you come up with that decision? And he's like, I hate working with that other guy. That guy's an idiot. I'm like, wait, so you're going to work with me because you just don't like work with that other guy? And he's like, well, yeah, I just, know that I just trust that you're not going to sell me something that's not going to work for me. And it was right then that I realized I cannot sell something I don't believe in. Like, this is not going to work for this guy and he could go out of business. So I went back to the office. I found the other top sales guy, a guy named Scott Limford, and was like, dude, we need to go start our own business. He's like, well, what are we going to do? I'm like, I have no idea. Let's figure it out. So we jumped on our computers. We're looking up all these different ideas from franchises to whatever. And anyways, the next day he comes in and he's like, I know what we're going to do. I'm like, well, what is it? He's like, we're going to be third-party call tracking providers. I found this company that will, and at the time, call recording was a kind of a new thing. He's like, but they'll record the calls. We can put unique phone numbers in all of their advertisements. Online, we can put this dynamic number insertion. So if someone looked up a certain keyword on Google and like Utah plumbers, and they obviously didn't know who they're going to go with, and they land on this guy's website, we know that we drove that to them, and then we could listen to the call, determine ROI. And so what we ended up doing was we ended up kind of just, working on that on the side. What was great is that we could go to business owners and say, hey, you have no idea what's working. You're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping that you're making the right decisions. But what we're going to do is be a third party. We're going to put tracking numbers with all your advertising companies, and we're going to hold the power. We're going to be able to tell you what's working, what's not. Get rid of the stuff that isn't, do more of the stuff that is, and know the difference between it all. And so that's kind of how our startups kind of emerged. And so we built that for about 8 years, and then ended up selling that company in 2015. But wow. I remember going back and talking to my wife and just saying, hey, me and Scott are going to start our own business. And here the economy was taking. We just bought our first house, had our first kid, and now I'm going to leave a 6-figure job to go start my own business. She thought we were nuts, but we ended up making 6 figures every year, bootstrapped it 50% each, and crushed it because we were selling something that mattered, that actually helped people. So anyway.
Wow, that's great. And then what about after that?
Yeah. So, I was selling that, or we were doing that company. We were able to incubate a few other companies outside of that one. And that kind of just cash flowed some other ideas. And, for me, I was just kind of on a journey to, towards the end, I just wasn't passionate about it anymore. Like I remember waking up one day and, here we have these companies. We eventually evolved into an agency. So we found that the best ROI was internet marketing done, properly. And so we were like managing Google AdWords accounts for companies when it was kind of a newer thing. And so we evolved into an agency and digital marketing agency as well. And, I just remember that, one day, I had a customer come to me and they'd been paying us for SEO, for those that don't know, that's search engine optimization. And that is like, based on Google algorithms and things like that. But anyways, these people were paying us all this money, and all of a sudden Google would change their algorithm, and these customers come to me and say, what happened to my rankings? I'm like, Google changed their algorithm. We got to start over. And so I hated selling something. Like if I ever feel like I couldn't sell something to like someone I knew, a friend or even a relative, then I knew I needed to move on. And I started just to realize, gosh, I have no control over what Google does. Like I just got disenfranchised with it, and I decided that I needed to move on. And so fortunately we had a couple of guys in the company that we'd put in charge, and Scott and I were able to sell it and kind of walk away and do something else. And so happy to move on to the next part of that story if you want, unless you have any questions.
That's right. We'll keep moving. So maybe go to Worklyfe. So I got from Paul Irving, who's one of the partners at GTM Fund that invested. I also, full disclosure, invested. And he says, He is a pioneer of rethinking sales team motivation and culture, and truly understands what drives teams to take their performance to the next level. So thanks for that, Paul. So nice intro there. Maybe tell us a little bit more about Worklyfe.
Yeah. So it was a fun story. I remember reading Simon Sinek, start with why. And I'm like, what the hell is my why? What is my purpose? Like, what am I trying to accomplish? So it really bothered me that I didn't know what that was. And so I went on a journey to figure that out. Unfortunately, with the sale of the company, I was able to, buy a few years to try to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I spent 2 of the most frustrating years of my life trying to figure it out. And for me, I really wanted to, kind of be impact focused. I wanted to solve a problem that I cared about and that mattered in the world. And I didn't know exactly what that was going to be. And so, after 2 years of just blowing through savings and my wife being like, dude, you just got to go get a job. Like, what are you doing? I ended up going to lunch with a founder friend of mine, kind of in desperation. Like, I knew this guy, he was just a friend, and I felt like he could help me. And so I remember just sitting at lunch with this guy and just being like, dude, I got to get inspiration somehow. I'm struggling over here. And he's like, well, how do you get inspiration? What are times in your life when you've been the most inspired? What brought that on? And so I started telling him stories. And one of the stories I shared with him is what unlocked everything I'm doing now. And I was telling him about when I was 12 years old. My parents had just got divorced. It was a total shock. We didn't see it coming. I moved in with my mom. She had left my dad for this guy that was a pilot, and they were flying to Colorado for a singing competition. And their plane crashed in the mountains of Colorado over by Aspen. And I remember after she died in this plane accident, I had this dream about her, and it was a very vivid dream. I kept a journal at the time, so I have it all written out. But I remember climbing over this boulder and seeing this plane fuselage spread across this meadow at the top of this mountain, and seeing my mom and talking to her on this mountainside. Anyways, it was this really inspirational kind of like dream that really helped me out. And I was telling him about it. And I kind of just said in passing in this conversation, you know what? I've always wanted to go to that place. Like, I feel like I would know it if I saw it. And he stopped me and was like, dude, it's been 27 years. Like, call your sisters before you leave lunch and plan that trip. Like, this is a perfect time to go get inspiration for, that's what you're trying to do. And so I called my sisters up and we planned this trip. And 6 months later, a day before we were going to leave, we were getting ready to leave. And I remembered all of a sudden that after my mom died, she had given, I got this picture frame from my grandma, and it had a bunch of money that was spread out inside this picture frame, and my mom's driver's license. It was just stuff from her wallet. And my grandma had just given this to me, and I'd held on to it. I could never bring myself to spend the money. I mean, as a 12-year-old, $200 is a lot of money, but I just considered it sacred money. So I held on to it for all these years. Well, all of a sudden I had this idea. I remembered the money, and I told my sisters, hey, did you guys know that I've had this money from mom's wallet for all these years? Why don't we have her pay for our dinner tonight? Like, why don't we have mom pay for part of our river rafting experience?
Yeah.
And so the hardest thing I've ever done is open up that picture frame and take that money out and spend it. And I remember giving it to the 16-year-old, it's just like, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But for 2 days, I was in total flow, thinking about this idea of sacred money. And thinking about, like, what would other people do with sacred money? Like, if I asked someone, well, hey, if you had sacred money, what would you spend it on? Mm-hmm. And you can imagine, maybe start thinking about some of the things people would answer with, right? But what it was, things that they thought intentionally about things that would bring them happiness and things that mattered, things that had meaning. It could have been a trip like the one I took, but it could also be, things that are preventing people from doing their best work and living their best life, like addiction or mental health or the loss of a loved one or nasty divorce. So there's any number of reasons why people are struggling at their job, and companies don't do a good job at all about being able to be there to support and help people, maybe understand and overcome those things. HR is not really built to support people to do that, and so I kind of feel like we've created something. Yeah.
Yeah, so all that was the moment to say, okay, hey, if we can do this for companies, especially focused on sales teams, is that the idea?
Yeah, so that's the whole thing. Is like, I was, after I had the idea for kind of Worklyfe, I'm like, let's help people set aside sacred money, surface what matters, and then let's find, ways to really intrinsically motivate them. And of course, my natural thoughts brought me to sales. And I thought, gosh, gift cards and cash and swag and stuff, does that really matter to people? Like, is that really still the thing we're doing to motivate sales? Are we still doing these crappy President's Club trips to Cancun? Like, who wants to hang out with their coworkers in their swimming suits? And does your plus one really want to do that? And it's like, why are we still doing this? You know, are people going to be more motivated to go do that or go on this New Zealand trip they want to do for their entire life? You know, so I just started kind of thinking about like, well, how do we like deconstruct these crappy incentives? Like President's Club, for example, it's like 3 months into an annual incentive, you already know who's going to win. And so it demotivates 80% of the team because it's the people that have a book of business that have been around for a long time. And so it's just like, these are, you know, and only 10% of the reps even have a chance of winning it. I'm like, why can't 100% of the reps win it? And why? Anyway, I just started thinking about all these things. So that's kind of where my mind went. And so I knew that I had never launched a tech company before. So the first thing I did when I came home from that trip was track down some of my founder friends that had sold tech companies. And one of the first people I spoke with was Jaron Paul. He had sold a company called CapShare. He's an entrepreneur I really respect. And I was telling him about my idea, and he's like, "Well, dude, I'm launching this idea called Spiff. Like, why don't you come help us and join our early team?" And so that's kind of what led me over to Spiff, and they're doing amazing commission automation. So no more spreadsheets. So definitely check out Spiff. And then after I learned a lot at Spiff and talked to a lot of sales leaders about incentives and personalizing them and commissions and stuff, then I took one more stop at a company called Blueboard. I wanted to find a company that was very innovative in the recognition and HR tech space, because that was going to be part of what we were going to do. So I found a company called Blueboard, and I ended up meeting my third co-founder for Worklyfe there and spent some good time there and just kind of helped them. They were selling like experiential rewards. So instead of like gift cards and so you could like, arm your people with experiences of their choice from their curated menu. Anyways, and they're selling mostly into HR teams. And so I thought, well, why don't you guys sell into sales teams? They're always doing spiffs. They're always having to come up with the next idea for a spiff. Like, why don't we launch this an experiential spiff program? So I helped productize or help them think about productizing that a little bit further. So that was great. The journey. And then I left to do Worklyfe. So that's the whole career journey.